Hello everyone and welcome to Superman Homepage Live, brought to you by supermanhomepage.com, the #1 Superman fan site in the world. In this, our August 19th, 2024 show, we're going to be covering a range of topics including James Gunn's comments on visual effects for the new Superman movie. We're going to be hearing from Isabella Red on her description of the film. We're going to be looking back with Terry Hatcher at her time when she nearly broke the internet. And we're going to be doing our fan favorite question, costume analysis of Chris Reeves' version of Clark Kent. We're going to be doing This Week in History. If we have time, we'll be looking at the November solicitations for the comic book side of things and so much more. Joining me, as always, is my good friend, Michael Bailey. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, Steve, how's it going?
Doing well. Unfortunately, Mark Lax is unwell tonight and sends his apologies. We wish him well and a speedy recovery. Suffering with a sinus infection, I believe. So probably not the best time to come on. I mean, I'm a bit congested. You can probably hear in the back of my voice, but I'm sure Mark didn't catch it from me.
Yeah, let's not rule it out. I mean, maybe it just came over the intertubes last week when we were all doing our doing the show. So yeah, I'm a little. I got allergy things going on, but not as bad as Mark. So I'm kind of thankful for that. But I hope he feels better. Though we are covering for him, he is really going from town to town helping people out as he's on the run from the law. And
right, yes. Yeah, he's a vigilante.
Hopefully he'll get that sorted out this week.
So wish you all the best, Mark, and get better soon. Another shout out to someone who we wish all the best, who is very unwell, is a good friend, Kenny Richardson, who I don't know if you met him back in Metropolis, Mike, when we were there. Kenny is a staple of the Superman celebration in Metropolis, Illinois.
Oh, yeah.
A great fella, doing very unwell at the moment, has been sent home from hospital. And we wish you all the best, Kenny, and stay strong, and sending all our love to you.
Yeah, I know Kenny. I remember back in 2013 when you all called me from the hotel, and he was one of the ones that got in the camera and said that he missed me being there because I was supposed to be there that year. And it's always nice seeing. It was always nice seeing his pictures on Facebook from him meeting all the Superman celebrities. So yeah, that was a little sad to hear, but
yeah. We send him our best. All right, so let's get into tonight's topics. We are across our YouTube channel. We want to thank our sponsors and patrons, and we have a new sponsor coming on board, new patron who has joined the ranks. We want to thank Luke Moody, Douglas Meacham, John Patrick Van Pelt, and Tina Murray. Thanks for your support, buying us a coffee this week. Thank you for supporting the Superman homepage and everything we do, especially this live show. So thank you to those fine Superman fans. Got my Superman mug again. Oh, just trying to get it there. Sorry, covering Superman. So having a drink.
Very good.
Of my coffee. Did that look real? I
think you sold it, yes.
Cool. Excellent. So thank you to them for supporting the show. And if you'd like to support the Superman homepage, and especially this live broadcast, you can click the join button on YouTube. There are different levels of membership with different levels of perks. Or you can go to patreon.com/Superman homepage. We appreciate any support we can get, whether it's from a tip to a full sponsorship like those fine Superman fans that we just mentioned. So let's get into tonight's topics. We are going to discuss the Superman movie, and it's been a little bit quiet of late. It's not a lot going on, as you know, where they've moved into the post-production phase of the film, so we're not going to be seeing all those great, fantastic photos that we saw of them in the streets of, where were they? Cleveland in Illinois. So they've obviously now doing the post-production, which involves, visual effects, editing, sound, all those kinds of things. And there's been the discussion going on the social media platform Threads with James Gunn, the director of the film, talking about the challenges of visual effects and the challenges the visual effects artists face. And James Gunn assured everyone that his crew will not be overworked or underpaid, explaining that while the effects in this film are the best they can be, James Gunn assures that and does that by always taking a different approach. He says, I've always given my visual effects artist collaborators time to do their jobs properly and the respect they deserve. And the quality of the visual effects in those films is uniformly great because of it, and because my friends at Weta and Framestore and ILM and more are amazingly talented. He says this is why we wrapped on Superman a year before the release, and why they've been hard at work on many shots for months before that. This is why we start hardly editing during the shoot. It's why I prepare so vigorously, and why we only shoot finished screenplays. And just can't praise the visual effects artists enough, which is fantastic, because there are so many films that the visual effects are a major part of today's, especially the big budget special effects films, where there's a lot of CGI and green screen and all that kind of stuff, that you want them to take as much time with the visual effects as they can so that it looks as realistic as possible. Because, while I know there was an artistic choice for the way they decided to do some of those cameo scenes in The Flash, it looked unrealistic, and a lot of people called it out for that.
Yeah, it looked like AI, or the AI pictures that we see now. And it's just, it always amuses me to see how people are reacting to certain things. Like, to be fair, most of the big comic book films are like wrapped a year before they come out, because there is so much visual effects works. And yeah, Disney has gotten a fair amount of flack, as people were pointing out in the chat, that some of the VX artists were underpaid and rushed, and so much was put on them to do all this work, and they just didn't have the time. It was just kind of at a breakneck speed for piddling wages. But I feel bad that James Gunn had to come out and make that statement, that he had to explain that he wasn't doing that. And the thing about how this particular iteration of the DC movies differed from the last one is this time there actually seems to be a definitive plan. Not like a pie in the sky plan where they they put out a thing with all, like, Marvel style with all the things. It looks like they have a realistic set of movies and series and such that they want to produce, and they're going to do it in a certain time period, and they're going to be prepared and ready to go to do those. And that's another thing that's giving me, like, positive vibes about this film, is that it feels like it's part of something that's going somewhere.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like the first phase of the Marvel films back in 2008, 2010, when it was just like, oh, we're actually getting all these movies. And there's always probably room for changes, but it seems like Gunn likes to have everything prepped before he even starts shooting a frame of film, because there are so many instances in Hollywood of them going back and doing reshoots. I mean, you mentioned The Flash. The ending on that thing was changed 3 times. I mean, that's just... I just feel so bad for the people involved, because I'm particularly hard on that film, but that doesn't mean that I don't have any kind of respect for, or that I have a lack of respect for the people that worked on the visual effects. They did what they could. It just didn't look good. Both of those statements can be true.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'm glad that they're taking their time with it, and they've allowed the time for it. And James Gunn says that he, when asked if deadlines can sometimes have a negative impact on the special effects and films, I'm sure that's the case, but not for him, he says, because he always has a script essentially finished months before shooting, always completed storyboards, and always insists that they wrap in time to do quality visual effects. So he says he wouldn't make a big film like this without the proper amount of post-production time, which gives me very much a lot of confidence for what we're going to see when we sit in the theatre in July 2025. So looking forward to that. Now, Isabella Merced, I'm not sure exactly how she pronounces her name, but she's playing Hawkwoman in the upcoming film, and spoke to the Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, where she has a bit of a chat about the film and how excited she is. Here's a little bit of a snippet of what she had to say in this very long interview.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited for everyone to see him. I think he's fantastic.
Green Lantern. This is meant to be. Come on. This is going to be Guy Gardner.
It's like Green Lantern. It's like the whole movie is very loyal to comic books, but with a James Gunn twist, you know?
Right.
So I really think it's funny, it's clever, but it's heartwarming, but it's, at least that was my experience on set. You know, obviously things can change in the editing room, but
Sure.
God, I loved James is so prepared. I could exhale on set, actually. I didn't even need to worry about exhaling after, because James is one of those people who knows, again, exactly what he wants, will stop at nothing to get it, has a shot list, communicates with his team. They all are prepared before they get there because they've worked with him for like, what, 20 plus years.
Right.
And so when somebody's that in charge and on it, like, you really have room to get excited and have faith in it.
So there's Isabella having a chat about working with James Gunn and the fact that he's so prepared and everybody knows what they're doing. And it's just, I guess when you have a crew and a cast, or a crew filming with you on multiple films, that you almost have like a shorthand way of communicating. And so there is not a lot of time wasted trying to get everybody on the same page. So, and it's, you know, I've heard people balk at the idea of it being funny, but you got to have a little bit of humor in these films. They can't take themselves too seriously. I mean, Superman the movie, which is the pinnacle for many people of Superman films, has a lot of fun moments in it. You know, from Frisky, will you come out of that tree, and the girl getting smacked at the end, to, you know, Clark Kent looking up and down the telephone booth. That's not really a telephone booth, as, you know, hey Jim, that's a, you know, that's a mad outfit. All those kinds of things. That there are so many comedic moments, but yet the film does not come across as being a comedy.
Yeah, the thing about James Gunn as a director, and I can't say that I've seen like every single film he's ever done, but I have seen both of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, and the very first Guardians of the Galaxy film, I'm still kind of mad at, because I was not expecting to start the film bursting into tears, because that film starts with the death of Peter Quill's mother, and it's very accurate to that experience, and the fact that he can pivot from that, and that he can make us feel bad for a computer generated raccoon, but also have moments where you're just laughing because it's funny. I think the real problem is, to me, is that, and I'm gonna use air quotes here, I blame the Nolan Batman films for this. I really don't, because there were genuine moments of humor in the Nolan Batman films that no one really wants to talk about. I mean, one of my favorite moments of that entire trilogy was the guy that was trying to blackmail Bruce Wayne, and, you know, Lucius Fox is like, so you're gonna come in here and try to blackmail the guy that goes out and beats up criminals every night? Good luck. That's a funny moment. That's a laugh moment, and you need those in these films, because you need that kind of moment of decompression. I think that's kind of, you know, to a certain extent, some of the, I can't really think of anything in Batman v Superman, but there were some moments of levity in Man of Steel as well.
Yeah.
So it's just, people get just so up in themselves about how, oh, he's just going to make it a comedy. And I don't think they understand that all great movies of this genre have moments of humor in them. It's just built into it, because you need that, because that personalizes things. So I have no doubt that this film is going to get to the heart of who Superman is in a good way, in a uplifting and inspiring way, not a he's a stranger in a strange land type of way.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm looking forward to seeing what it is. I don't, you know, I like I said, I don't think it's going to be a comedy. So it needs to have some moments of levity, and it's going to, you know, have some
verisimilitude.
That's the one. And apologies, yes, I did put Cleveland in the wrong place. It is obviously in Ohio. So
Yeah.
I apologize for this Aussie getting it wrong. But
Guys, he's on another continent, guys. Come on. Can you guys even name the different states of Australia?
yeah, exactly.
And
So
by the way, people in the chat that are from Australia, your answers don't
you're
count.
exempt. John Patrick Van Pelt gives us a super chat asking, do we know if this does well in theaters, if James Gunn will do a sequel to Superman? That's the hope, I guess. And I know James Gunn has a plan, and they're going to be doing a conjoined universe where everything will be flowing, and Supergirl will be part of that, and everything else is connected somehow. And I hope that they get to do a straight out Superman sequel without him just being shoehorned into somebody else's film, or other heroes being shoehorned into his, even though there are other heroes in this first film from the very first outing. But yeah, I guess we'll have to see. And everything is dependent on box office takings, even though James Gunn is the studio's CEO, co-CEO. Money talks.
Yeah, I mean, I think we really need to walk before we fly here. To make a really bad pun, but I'm serious. I think we really need. One of the problems with these films, and especially the last two Superman movies, is that everybody was just like gunning for the sequel before the first one even came out. And I think what we proved there is that that's not always a guarantee. Now, Batman v Superman was a follow-up to Man of Steel and was in many ways a sequel, but it wasn't a straight-up Superman story sequel. It was a sequel in terms of continuing the story with other characters involved.
Yeah.
And I just I want this one to come out and do well, and then we can start talking about a sequel.
Yeah, one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that's the movie side of things. As we know, the film will be out in July 2025. So there is a date on your screen, July 11th, 2025, in theaters across the world. And we will keep you abreast of any of the details that keep coming out, anything that James Gunn continues to talk about in relation to this film. You can be sure that we'll be covering it here on Superman homepage. All right, so moving along to the TV side of things, as of course we are awaiting the premiere of season 4 and the fourth and final season of Superman and Lois, and then obviously next year we'll be getting a third season of My Adventures with Superman. There isn't a lot to look at on the TV side of things of late, but Terry Hatcher participated in a new interview with The Guardian to promote the 15th anniversary of her film Coraline, which is back in theaters now in a newly remastered 3D version. And amongst the interview, she was asked about the photo shoot that she did with her as Lois Lane, wrapped in nothing but a Superman cape. And this was back in the early 1990s to promote Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. And Terry Hatcher recalls the shoot, and obviously recalls that at the time she nearly broke the internet because it was the most downloaded image of the time across the internet. And it nearly didn't happen because initially this was kind of like the last idea. They had done a couple of hours of shooting of her and, Lois in the pencil skirt, and the reporters get up a blouse and, and what have you. And then they just said to her, what if we tried without the blouse? And just wrapping the cape around you. And she was like, well, what does that imply? Why would Lois Lane be naked under the cape? But they did it, and now she's proud of it.
Okay, so I'm not questioning her or saying that she's fibbing or anything, but I don't know if everybody has forgotten the advertising campaign for this show. But one of the others was like her in kind of a tank top type undershirt being held by Superman, and he had the sex was selling this show. There were a couple commercials that I remember seeing during soap operas. So they knew who they were. Yep. They were going to, and the only reason I knew that is I was babysitting these kids, and the little girl wanted to watch soap operas, which her mom let her do. I have no idea why. I don't think that's a good idea. But I had not been seeing commercials for Lois and Clark like on ABC during the evening time, like I did back in 1990 with the Flash. And then I realized, oh, they're trying to sell it to a different audience, and it was the Lois Lane one that I remember is her looking at the camera and it's like, let me tell you about the guy I spent the night with last night. So this was the impetus, and she probably, like, okay, I will say this: any woman who is on a set and they ask them to do something that even implies nudity and she wants to question it, that is absolutely her right, and she should. I want to know, but the only thing I question is, it's like, do you really not know why they want to do this? I mean, I get that you want to get it from them, and that makes sense, but that kind of, this tracks. And I remember this thing being the most downloaded image on the internet. I remember going to a coffee shop in like 1995, and a guy had like, this guy who was sitting there, me and a buddy were talking with, he's like, yeah, these are the things I downloaded. And he had like the cover of Action Comics #1, and he had that image of Terry Hatcher. So it was a thing, y'all. And I have to say, it does kind of show you how not populated the internet was in 1994, that was the most downloaded image, but it was the most downloaded image.
Yeah. The internet was very sparse at the time. There wasn't much else going around. I mean, I remember Lois and Clark being a huge deal on the internet at the time. And it was very early days of the internet. Mid 90s was when it was, starting to kick off. The Superman homepage was just in existence in 1994, probably because of mostly around Lois Lane and Lois and Clark, I should say. So, it was a big deal at the time, and yes, there was an internet back then, Nostalgic Podblast, and yes, they're real and they're fabulous, quoting from Seinfeld.
Yeah, it's just so kind of quaint to think about. Yeah. Like, Lois and Clark, Smallville had a very big online presence, and that was still very early. I mean, I remember Al Goth telling us that when we interviewed him years ago, that the homepage was one of the few sites really talking about the show on the internet. Mm-hmm. But it's not to discount how much of a presence Lois and Clark did, and how the internet, how it was one of the early places of Superman fans congregating on the internet and having a place to go to.
Yeah. Fun times. Nostalgic indeed. All right, so that's where we're at with the comments from Terry Hatcher about her remembering that photo shoot. Really interesting to look back and remember those times on the internet. All right, we are going to jump into some of our regular segments now. Let's jump into the fan favorite segment of our show. Don't know what happened there. All right, so we are now moving into the fan favorite question and segment of our show, where last week we asked the question, what is your favorite Supergirl comic book cover? And we had a couple of people respond. Who did we start with first, Michael?
We're going to start with JP Rocha, who wrote, my favorite Supergirl cover is by Stanley Artgerm Lau. It is a variant issue for issue 19 of Supergirl Rebirth. I purchased a print of this cover at C2E2. I love the retro feel of this cover and the deco buildings.
Yeah, very cool. Stanley Artgerm Lau did a number of variant covers for Supergirl and very realistic looking as well, but that's a cool one. Thank you, JP. Next up, we have Lorenzo Valdez, who said, for my favorite Supergirl comic book cover, I will again submit a cover that I also recently submitted as my favorite Connor Kent Superboy cover, that being Kat Stagg's cover for Smallville Season 11. Chaos #4. Supergirl is actually more prominently featured on this cover than Superboy is, rendered of course in the likeness of Laura Vandervoort in a strikingly epic pose as she unleashes her heat vision. Very cool. Thank you.
Okay, Jason, I hope growing up in the Lehigh Valley has prepared me to pronounce your last name, Jason Jaroslawski. If I got that wrong, please let me know. I'm going to go to the 80s for my fave Supergirl cover. Supergirl number 13, classic pose with the American flag behind her. Very nice. For my runner-up, I'm a big fan of the Olivia Newton-John Let's Get Physical look from Supergirl number 23. Big fan of the headband, plus it keeps Kara hair from getting in her face when she flies. P.S. Enjoy the return of the This Week in History segment. Keep up the great work, guys. I, too, am a huge fan of the headband look. In fact, I'm looking just behind the camera is the calendar I have for this year, and this month was that Supergirl. So I've been looking at that for the past 19 days.
There you go. Very cool. Thank you to Jason. Next up, we have Ryan Ignatius Pratt, who sent in 3 covers saying, it's hard to pick a single favourite Supergirl cover, but I've always liked the following 3. The fun-filled Batgirl number 14 by Stanley Artgerm Lau. The classic Supergirl number 79 by Ed Beans and Alex Lee. And the iconic Crisis on Infinite Earths number 7 by George Perez.
So for anybody that isn't aware, both that Ed Benes or Beans take on Crisis number 7. Crisis number 7 is somewhat inspired by an issue of Uncanny X-Men. And that, where Cyclops is holding Jean Grey's body, that image is actually inspired by the very classic Robin Dies at Dawn cover from the either late 50s or early 60s of Batman, where he's holding Robin in that position. So the Ed Beans one is an homage of an homage of an homage of an homage. It's an homage four times removed. So
it's always nice to see different versions of an idea reproduced. I've seen Action Comics number 1 covers done over and over and over and over again.
Oh, so funny thing about that, I've been playing the Injustice 2 mobile game. And one of the characters, apparently at one point, they had a Golden Age Superman who looks very different from all the other characters. And one of his special moves is he throws a green car at you.
Ah, nice.
I was just like, oh, that's cute. I don't like that he hit me, but that's fine.
Very good. In the comments, just as a last minute one, I think this is a look he's looking for. John Patrick Van Pelt sent in this. I'm going to try to get it up if I can for us. Let's have a look. Says this one, another good one that I like is Supergirl number 6, an issue of the series Supergirl Volume 1 with a cover date of August 1973. I guess that might be the one. The Gang Lords, a surprise guest star.
That's I hope he asked.
Yeah,
because
consent
that's
is
not going to
important.
end. Yeah, consent's important, especially if you're kissing a Kryptonian who can plant you into a wall. So yeah, I really hope. I hope that was all above board.
Yes, different times. All right, so that was the. Oh, what is our new fan favorite question for this month, Michael?
It is, what is your favorite Jor-El and Lara comic book cover? And yes, one of the covers from the recent solicitations is, I think we can count that if they want to use that one.
For sure. It's out there in the public. Why not? So yeah, info@supermanhomepage.com. Your favorite Jor-El and Lara comic book cover, whether it's just Jor-El or just Lara or both of them on the cover together. It's hard to separate them. Sometimes they're usually featured together. So info@supermanhomepage.com. Send your answers in and we will feature those when we come back to this segment next week. And apologies to anyone who is listening to this as a podcast rather than a visual video. We try to describe them as best we can from time to time.
Yeah.
But we appreciate nonetheless that you are part of this show. All right, so that was the fan favorite question for this month. We're going to take a quick break, play some messages. On the flip side, we're going to do our costume analysis of Clark Kent, played by Christopher Reeve, as well as This Week in History, as brought to us by Michael Bailey. Back right after these messages, folks.
We'll be back in a moment with the exciting climax of today's episode. So stand by.
If you're enjoying Superman Homepage Live, then please like and share this video with your family and friends. Also, if you'd like to subscribe to our YouTube channel, then you can click on the bell to receive notifications whenever we post a new video. You can also join our YouTube membership program. Just click the join button below. Or you can become a patron and support our website by going to patreon.com/Superman homepage.
Look, up in the sky.
It's a bird.
It's a plane. No, it's SupermanHomepage.com, the #1 Superman fan site in the world. SupermanHomepage.com, covering the world of Superman from the 1930s to today. News, reviews, rumors, and reports. SupermanHomepage.com for all your Superman comics, TV shows, movies, cartoons, radio shows, and more. Everything you ever wanted to know about the Man of Steel and more. SupermanHomepage.com.
Thanks, Superman Homepage, for all the support over the years. I really appreciate it.
I'm Matt Bomer. I'm the voice of Superman and Superman Unbound, and this is the Superman Homepage.
Right here on Superman Homepage.
I'm freezing! Superman!
Uh-oh, sounds like Lisa and Scott are trapped in the icy cave of that frosty-faced villain, Captain Cold. This is a job for Superman.
My fast freeze zapper will freeze Superman forever.
No way, Captain. Here, kids, my new Superman Hot Cocoa Mix is the super tasting way to warm up.
It's really sweet. And chocolatey.
And see, Captain Cold can't take this warm reception. New Superman Hot Cocoa, the super tasting way to warm up.
And we're back on Superman Homepage Live, where, Captain Cold looks like he's suffering from a bit of a cold there. So, again, shout out to Mark. Hope you're getting better.
Captain Cold versus Superman. That wasn't much of a fight. Yeah.
All right, so let's get into our costume analysis segment of our show. Here we're looking at the Christopher Reeve version of Clark Kent, and we will look at the different aspects of this costume going from head to toe. And let's jump in right now and have a look. There is Christopher Reeve playing Clark Kent and Superman, and we'll get into the hair issue in a second where you can see the part is on a different side. But so looking at Clark Kent's glasses, here we've moved away from the black wireframe that we've seen in both the previous 1940s and 1950s version. Even the 1960s 66 version from Bob Holliday was very different. Here we have the more of a brown, would you call them horn-rimmed glasses?
Somewhat. That's as good a description as any.
So, again, we've got the glass lenses in there, which sometimes, I don't know if we can see if that's a reflection of somebody in the glasses. Could be Dick Donner in there. But nevertheless, we have a different style of glasses than what we've seen in the past, which I prefer the thicker kind of frame in a glass, in a frame for the glasses, for the spectacles, because it does act as a kind of a mask in a way that it's a bit more hiding his face.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. You know, when you look at how and he had those really even in Superman 4 to a certain extent, but especially into like Superman 3, he had those very large frames that kind of dominated the upper part of his face, and it does do a lot to kind of mute what Christopher Reeve looks like. So it's something that when I think of Superman and his glasses, those are kind of what I think of.
In the comments, John Patrick Van Pelt asks if the glasses were made from the ship that brought Clark Kent to Earth, and that's our super chat there from John. Not necessarily in this version. It doesn't really state anything along those lines. We're never really told where the glasses come from. In fact, we're never even really told where the costume comes from, other than we do know that the material is in his duffel bag that he takes to the fortress, but we don't know whether Martha had made the suit beforehand or whether the fortress somehow turned those blankets that he came to Earth into a costume. It's never really explained, but you can kind of draw your own conclusions. But the glasses are definitely not ever mentioned as being anything other than glasses that he bought from a store.
Yeah, the ship that he came in these movies did not have a windshield, so
Yes.
there's really not one. I think the only time I've ever really seen Clark like show where he gets his glasses was in an episode of Superboy, where he was going through like old glasses in the barn that
Right.
were his father's, and that's how he picked out what glasses he was going to wear.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I it's a really good it's a good question because it does bring up the fact that in the pre-crisis era, the lenses did come from the ship because that way his heat vision could go through it without melting it,
Mm.
which is a problem Clark was having as Superboy in his Superboy years. So good question, John.
Yeah.
That's a fun one.
I remember in Lois and Clark, Dean Kane would often like lower the
Yep.
glasses to use his heat vision to get around that problem. But then we move on to the hat, and again, love the fedora and love the style of it. And again, it just goes to mask his look somewhat and give Clark Kent an appearance that is a different silhouette to Superman, and therefore kind of pushes the whole secret identity thing even further. But yeah, I love having the fedora as part of Clark Kent's get up.
And he's so good with it, he can throw it on a hat hook without looking. So, but yeah, I like the fedora too.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think is not a must, but it definitely goes a long way towards. And it's in the 70s, men were still wearing hats, so it was still part of, it didn't stand out too much. But I like the fact that Clark Kent comes across as being from a earlier period, that he is a bit of a dork, that he's not up to date with the times. I know in Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, they brought him up to date and they made him, more of a modern man. But I like, if we're going with the whole secret identity, mild-mannered thing, that his style is dated and that he is not up to date with the modern fashions.
Yeah, he's more of a conservative dresser.
Yeah.
May not be, and I mean that in terms of not a political slant, but just just in terms of he's not. There were no, and there never will be any websites dedicated to Clark Kent's ties from the movies like there was for Dean Kane's ties in the 90s.
So funny. And then we look at the suit, and here I've got one of the models that were created, because we don't really have a lot of great photos of the entire suit, but this is modeled after one version of the suit. And I love the three-piece suit. I know it's a throwback. I love it. I love the look of it. Having a vest underneath the jacket, the pinstripes. I love that. I love that the tie is, very 70s. It's got a pattern to it. And
it's wide.
It's wide. Even the collar is fairly wide, so even on the jacket and the dress shirt. So it's very much an office look from that period, but very classy still.
Yeah, it's one of the things that would kind of change in Superman 4. In Superman's 1, 2, and 3, I mean, Superman 3, he had that god-awful brown suit, which would lead certain news stations over here probably having a fit if their treatment of a past president is any indication. But when you look at what Clark wears, especially since 1 and 2 were filmed pretty much at the same time for the most part, and even the reshoots on 2, you were still in the 70s, so you did have those wide collars on the shirt, and that one isn't particularly as wide as some of the other. I don't know what it was about the 70s that men had to wear a tie that was basically the circumference of their neck. But when you see, like in Superman 4, he's dressing more of a later 80s suit with a thinner tie and a thinner shirt. But I'm with you. I always think that Clark looks great in a three-piece suit.
Mm-hmm.
I like seeing him in like the shirt and tie, but I like it when he's wearing a vest too, because and Alex Ross drew a fantastic version of this type of suit in the what is that called, the Christmas treasury size book that he did with Paul Dini. But no, I really like I like it when Clark wears a suit. It's just I don't think it's bad when he doesn't, but especially for these movies, Clark Kent wearing a 3-piece suit just feels right.
Yeah, exactly. Another super chat question from John Patrick Van Pelt asking, was the blue suit that we saw Christopher Reeve wear, was that the same collar we saw him in the animated series? It's a bit of a stretch. I think it's just a
Yeah.
suit. Yeah, I don't think there's any correlation.
Yeah, they rarely put him in the blue suit with the red and black striped tie that he was in the comics at the time. And if you're curious as to why all of his suits or most of his suits looked the same, is because in the comics of the 60s and 70s and into the 80s, he had treated his suits with a chemical that allowed him to compress them to put into his cape pouch, and that turned them blue.
There you go. There's the explanation. Very good. And then we get to the hair. And as we kind of mentioned at the very start, Clark Kent in this movie, in these series of movies, parts his hair on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, where Superman parts his hair on the left. Another distinction between the two that makes the look completely different. And here it's very kind of flattened, and there's the waviness has kind of gone out of it, and there's obviously no hint of a spit curl or a curl at the front. So very bland, mild-mannered hair.
Yeah, it's muted and it's meant to look that way. It looks like the hair of a man that wears a hat.
Yes, exactly.
So.
Very good. And then overall, obviously, he wore different suits, and this is, I think, from Superman 2.
That'll be one of the reshoots.
Yeah, and a different suit and tie or what have you there, but still the 3-piece look. But overall, love the Clark Kent look for Christopher Reeve's version of the character. I think it's what I think about when I think of Clark Kent, especially when the fedora is being worn. So a solid 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, it's extremely formative. I mean, this is the version that I really became familiar with more than anything else growing up. So it's like one of those things, like when you get into the comics post-crisis, his wardrobe is a little better. He's more apt to roll up his sleeves and loosen the tie and all that, look like a little more laid back. But this is, when I was a kid, this is what I would think of as Clark Kent.
Yes, exactly. And Nostalgic Pod Blast mentioning that, yes, Christopher Reeve did wear wigs in some of the films, whether it was the Superman wig or Clark Kent. So definitely there were wigs used. Not that you could tell so much. And then when John Patrick Van Pelt asks what kind of hair gel did Clark use, I don't think there was gel back in the 70s, early 80s. I think it was more Brill cream.
Yeah, it was a little double do ya. Yeah, you look so debonair. Why do I know the jingle for Brill cream? Why do I have that in my memory?
Wow. So there we have it. There is the Clark Kent analysis of the costume worn by Christopher Reeve, or the look of Clark Kent as brought to us by Christopher Reeve in the 4 Superman films. Next week, we will move forward and we will look, I think next up would be Dean Cain's version of Clark Kent.
If we're skipping over the Clarks of Superboy, yes.
Yeah, we'll come back to those maybe later in the series. But next up is looking at Superman, not Superboy versions. We will move to Dean Cain's version of Clark Kent, which is very different. So we'll be back next week with that. All right, so let's move into this week in history. And let's get into Michael's segment looking at the decades over the last 80 years that of comic books that were released this week, 10 years by 10 years each decade.
Come with me now, my son, as we break through the bonds of your earthly confinement, traveling through time and space.
And this one's for you, Jason, since you mentioned it in your comment on the covers. Yeah, we're going to go back to 1954. It's kind of a sparse week this week. But we have Clark Kent, Superboy carving up, looks like a turkey. I don't know why this is this month and not more into a comic that would be released in November, but whatever. But yes, we have Superboy's sister in this, which is, I'm sure it's wacky and hijinks are involved. So we're just going to keep on with Superboy for the next couple of decades. In 1964, we have Superboy number 116, the Wolf Boy of Smallville. I love Kurt Swan. I really do. He's not selling that he is particularly wolfy.
No,
in
there's
that
a few
thing.
hairs
It looks
and
like
things on his face.
yeah, it looks like he's dirty more than anything. And I'm sorry, he's a teenage boy. He's going to have hair growing in weird places. I'm just saying. But and you know what? I don't blame him for wanting to hang out with wolves because humans are terrible. Jumping ahead to 1974, we have Superboy and starring the Legion of Superheroes, not quite and the Legion of Superheroes yet. But this is 100 pages for only 60 cents, which means we have a bunch of different. We have a new Legion story. We have some from the past, some featuring other members of the Legion. So for 60 cents, it's a pretty good value. Pretty busy cover, I would say, with all the boxes and everything and the faces at the bottom. In 1984, we have Action Comics number 561, which is a cool Toyman cover. We also have Superpowers number 5. This is the first miniseries spinning out of the toy line that is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year of the single best action figure line based on a comic book universe ever. The Superpowers figures were top notch from beginning to end, and I am prepared to fight and die on that hill. And very forgettable, we have World's Finest number 309, because we're heading into that era of World's Finest that isn't as good. But some of these were recently reprinted in that Kurt Busiek hardcover, because he wrote a couple of these back then. Jumping ahead to 1994, we are still in Zero Month. We have an iconic cover by Dan Jurgens. Superman number 0 with the lightning in the background, and he's all shadowed with just the S basically glowing off of the black body and the cool cape. So yeah, this is continuing the peer pressure storyline that introduced Conduit to the comics. In 2004, we have Adventures of Superman number 631. This is... I'm trying to remember. I think this is the fallout of Lois getting shot.
Right.
Which is one of Greg Rucka's best issues of his run, because for those of you who weren't there or may have forgotten, Lois Lane gets shot in Umek. Umek, by the way, is a fake Middle Eastern country. It stands for Unnamed Middle Eastern Country. That's what Umek stands for. But Lois gets shot, and the Justice League freaking mobilizes. Like, there's this thing of John Jones getting the word about it, and he tries to contact Superman, and Superman doesn't want to talk to him because he's trying to process what just happened. So it's like John's like, nope, we're getting this, and Wally gets in on the action. It is such a good issue. I cannot say enough good things about that. And 2014, we have Multiversity, the Grant Morrison written project that has the Justice League Incarnate, who has the Calvin Ellis version of Superman, as well as Captain Carrot, who is technically a Superman character, kind of. In the less than cartoony version of Captain Carrot that was recently turned into a McFarlane figure. And we have Supergirl number 34. Yes, we are still doing Doomed. This story never ended. We're going to be talking about solicitations in a second. I'm sure there's an issue of Doomed in there to talk about that's coming out in November. In the real world, on August 20th, which is tomorrow, but today for Steve, Amy Adams was born in 1974. And on August 24th, which is Saturday, in 1993, that is when Superman number 82, which is the Back for Good issue. It's the end of the reign of the Supermen. where Superman finally gets his costume back and defeats the cyborg Superman. Spoilers for a book that is now over 30 years old. But that is this week in history.
There you have it. Thank you, Michael, for that. That was fantastic looking back. And yeah, I was surprised to see Amy Adams is born in Italy.
Yeah.
Of all places.
I am thinking, again, don't quote me on this. I think she's a military brat.
Yeah, you might be right there. You might be right. So she's still younger than me, just.
She's 2 years older than me, and she looks so much better than I do. So I'm just going to say that right now.
Very good. So that was this week in history. Thank you, Michael. All right, so we do have some time for some other discussions, and I mentioned the solicitations that are coming out in November of this year were released this past week. And very interestingly, Action Comics now goes weekly in November.
Yep.
So we've got a number of images. I'll just bring them up as you talk.
Yeah, the Action Comics for 3 or 4 months is going weekly. I think it's 3 months because I think it's 12 issues total that Mark Waid is writing with a backup. But this story looks great. It looks like a lot of fun. It looks like very, very Silver Agey in its kind of premise of going into the Phantom Zone and going back to Krypton and all that. But it's very much rooted in the present. And I love that we're going to be seeing Jor-El and Lara. I love that we're going to be seeing Mon-El. I love that the Phantom Zone is involved, and I love that Mark Waid is getting to write that. I've seen him doing a lot of interviews. We need to get him on the show.
Yeah,
to talk about this.
Definitely. And then we've also got this. I'll bring it up now. Absolute Superman #1. A new Superman. It's obviously the Absolute Universe, whatever they're doing there, without the fortress, without the family, without a home. What's left is the Absolute Man of Steel. Is this something you're looking forward to?
No. But let me qualify that by saying if this is something you're excited for, I hope it's great for you. This is not a Superman that I want to read about. I have been putting up with this Superman for so many years now that I'm just at the point where I'm just like, nope, I'm good. You guys, like I said, I will read this when the trades go on sale on Comixology.
Mm-hmm.
So that way I'm only paying like $5-6 for, however many issues, and then I'm not paying, $5.99 an issue. It's just, it's like DC just can't let go of this. They cannot let go of having a Superman that is detached from everything that makes him Superman. It's just like, DiDio's gone, y'all. Y'all realize that, right? Dan DiDio is no longer with the company, and you've been doing great things. But there might be an audience for this. There are people who like this take on Superman. So I'm not going to yuck their yum.
Yeah, fair enough. And then there's also Superman #20 out in November. Superman and Superwoman investigate Lois Lane's new powers as they deal with the unstoppable Doomsday. But when the mysterious time trapper reveals his ultimate secret, it shakes Clark, Lois, and the rest of the Super family to their core. So, yeah.
And I think there was also a mention in there about the election with Perry White.
I didn't see that that solicitation. But, yeah, someone mentioned that a little bit earlier about... is Perry White still going to be mayor of Metropolis and all that kind of stuff? If that storyline's still happening. I mean, Lois has still been the editor of the Daily Planet of recent, so it'll be interesting to see what they do there, whether or not that falls apart or whether or not Perry continues.
He put his campaign on hold during the whole Brainiac affair. I think they're resolving it in November because that's when the election will be in the United States.
Right.
So it kind of makes sense that you would put it in that issue.
Yes, draw some eyes towards the comic book side of things. So, there's lots else going on in there. There's also obviously the next My Adventures with Superman comic book that continues.
Yep.
And there's also this one that we want to talk about as well, the Superman 100 project.
Yes, finally.
Yes, so all of Hero Initiative's 100 plus original covers to DC Comics Superman #6 are on display in this great book with art by Alan Davis, Kevin Eastman, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, praise be his name, Dan Jurgens, Ed McGuinness, Frank Miller, Frank Quitely, and many, many more. See all the covers along with a special behind-the-scenes section showing developmental art, along with even more bonus content. And there will only be one printing of this book ever. So get it now so you don't blow your chance.
Yeah, the cool thing about this is they've been doing this for decades. I remember back in like the late 2000s, you had like a Spider-Man 100 covers and a Hulk one and all that, and it's all for the Hero Initiative. If you're not familiar with what the Hero Initiative is, it's a charity and an organization put together to help comic pros that need help financially. So because comic books are a freelance business, and most of the time they do not have any kind of health care. I won't get into that because that'll get many nasty comments in the comment section, and I don't want Steve to have to deal with that. But basically, like Dave Cockrum was an artist that before he passed benefited from the Hero Initiative. And I'm finally glad that Superman is getting one because I'm more apt to buy that because it's Superman related.
Exactly. This one comes out December 18th, but it was part of the November solicitations. So it's definitely something worthwhile getting, even for the artwork alone, but the fact that it actually helps that charity, which helps comic book creators in medical and financial need, is a great, even better reason to pick it up. So that comes out in December. So that's the solicitations coming out in November. I mentioned last week that I was going to do an article or video about whether or not Superman TV shows and movies should stay true to comic book canon. I did that. It's up on the website and on our YouTube channel now. So I'm always good for my word. When I say I'm going to do something, I usually follow through. So look for that article and video, which delves into the arguments on both sides of that discussion, and you can participate with your comments as to whether or not which side of the argument you fall on.
Yeah, I'm glad that's out there because I remember us talking about it last week.
Exactly. All right, so that is pretty much it for tonight's show. I want to thank everyone who tuned in to Superman Homepage Live and was with us for the past hour. Thank you for your reactions, your comments. We really appreciate the fact that you've spent the last hour with us. It's greatly appreciated. A shout out to our friend Mark Lax, who is doing poorly at the moment. We wish him well, and we'll look forward to have him rejoin us next week. Thank you to my co-host, Michael Bailey, for joining me this week. Thanks, Michael.
Pleasure as always, Steve.
And don't forget, Michael, Mark, and I will be back next week on Monday, August 26th at 7:30 p.m. Pacific time for another edition of Superman Homepage Live. We hope you'll join us then. Thanks to our sponsors and patrons. We've got a new one this week, so I'll make sure I get his name right. Luke Moody, Douglas Meacham, John Patrick Van Pelt, and Tina Murray. Thank you for your support. Michael and I, as we said, Mark will be back next week. Check out supermanhomepage.com for all your daily news updates on everything surrounding the Man of Steel. I'm Steve Eunice on behalf of myself and Michael Bailey. Thanks for watching Superman Homepage Live, brought to you by supermanhomepage.com. Good night.